Everyone dreams of living an uncommon life, and the best asset you have to achieve your dreams is you. Welcome to the Uncommon Wealth Podcast. We're going to introduce you to people who are living uncommonly. We're also going to give you some tools and strategies for building wealth and for pursuing an uncommon path that is uniquely right for you.
Hello there, and your ears do not deceive you. You do not recognize the voice that's coming through. That's because my name is Ben Fust. You've met me maybe a couple times before on previous episodes of the Uncommon Wealth Podcast. They bring me in for special occasions. I'm less likely to cause any trouble over the air, and so that's what I'm doing here. I'm the Chief Knob Turner here at the Uncommon Wealth Podcast, and we are celebrating the 200th episode of the Uncommon Wealth Podcast. Fellas, congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. It's all Philip.
Well, it's all kind
Philip.
Of Ben. It's all because of you.
Okay, I see no one's prepared an acceptance speech.
Yeah.
So
No, we haven't.
So we're gonna kick off with I don't know, just maybe a few interesting anecdotes about what it means to get to 200 podcasts.
I'd like to know that.
So we're talking about how long does it take? And I think we're just before the show started. We said it's 5 full years, but you're rolling into year 6.
Okay.
And so
2018, January, we started.
Exactly right. So you put 5-6 years into something, put in 200 episodes. Now that accelerated because over time, how often you were releasing podcasts
has changed.
Yeah, has shifted. As a matter of fact, not only are we talking going from what was it every other week, I think before? Was it?
Yeah,
every other week before. So now you're at every week. Plus, there's a series of kind of these bonus episodes. And I want to get to some of the intention behind that stuff as we go through the conversation. But what was the catalyst to podcasting more often?
Well, I think that we felt like we had a lot in queue at that time.
Yeah.
I think we were running about 5 or 6 months in queue, and we were like, we can kick this up a notch.
Yeah.
And then Ben, my good friend Ben, you said, you got to keep feeding that beast. Like once you turn this dial up, you don't turn this dial back down. You sure? And I'm like, well, let's do it. And so we got to every week, and I think that was going well until, like you said, it started eating us up. And so then we started changing the cadence of it to doing some of these simple steps. More application. How do we just get quick, get in, get out, Muhammad Ali, fly like a butterfly, sting like a bee kind of thing. And then that helped too. And then Aaron, I would say kudos to Aaron for getting awesome guests. He does a great job with that.
Oh, yeah. Wide variety of folks coming in, Mr.
Yes.
Pretty cool. Interesting people, all kinds of interesting stories and the way that their uncommon path shows up. It's interesting to look at the diversity of the different folks who are benefiting from what is a both common view of looking at something, but is uncommon in and of itself.
Right.
It's been super cool. I want to talk a little bit about some of those changes in content. But the reason I bring it up because I think for this audience, it's a common thing to run into, whether you're podcasting or not. Anytime you're trying to take some level of influence in life, whether you're going to do blog posts, social media stuff, podcasts, or whatever, the minute that you try to use your voice in that way to influence it does set an expectation in someone's mind. Influence doesn't tend to be the person that drops by your table, says hello, and then sees you again eating breakfast 6 months later. That's not influence, that's interruption. Right? And so influence tends to require a level of consistency. And I think and maybe you guys are running into this, but it feels like it's a common struggle among entrepreneurs or people who are not only kind of cutting their own trail, but they're trying to influence other people or draw people in to the way of looking at that. And so, I guess, have you seen that with people that you work with, or in other ways of which you've tried to create influence, where there's kind of a tension between starting to try to influence people, but then, frankly, the amount of commitment and effort it takes to persist in it?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead. I'll let you go first.
Oh, thanks. I don't know. I guess, are you asking in the sense of our own industry or just overall what we're seeing?
Yeah, in general, it feels like for people who are doing entrepreneurial type of work, some of it's you're trying to get people to engage in whatever your business is, but a lot of times it's frame of mind stuff.
Right. Yeah, I'll go and then you can go. Because I feel like I get to interact with a lot of business owners.
Yeah.
And serving other people and pouring your life to other people is exhausting at times. It's also encouraging. It's almost kind of like parenting, we've said. It's the hardest thing you've ever have to do, but it's also the most rewarding. So it's refining. It's also developing grit. But like these people who are on this path of creating something have this emotional roller coaster that just wears on you over time. And I would say that it wears on me. Like I'm not opposed from that, or
you're not exempt.
I'm not exempt at all.
Yep.
And so it's great to have Aaron on board, but it's also great to have the community around us that we are striving to be that beacon of hope for people who have never experienced this or are just starting this path, or even the people who have well experienced in the path. It's nice to have a common group of people that are uncommon, that look at this world in an uncommon way, that are creating, but they're also serving other people in it. It's super helpful. So I want to be the beacon for those people.
Yes, that's right. And I think maybe to the point then is that it does require a level of consistency, and you don't always get to see the response to it. Podcasting especially is it's a very lonely proposition. Yeah. You're talking and you guys aren't in the room here, but like we're at a table and there's a few lamps in here and a half-drunken can of Coke. Yeah. But like it just feels like three fellas in a room. Yes. And so you don't know who it's going to hit and what way it's going to hit them. You don't even know. It's hard to even tell whether people are listening. Podcast statistics are a little bit difficult to get to.
Right.
And so does the thing I said mean anything?
Or resonate with anybody.
Right. Yeah. Right. It doesn't even matter.
So let me go back because every episode, we try to make that episode resonate with us. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? It's almost a therapeutic session for us. And Aaron and I, that's why we started kind of this bonus content of like, if I was a guest on somebody's show, it would be so fun to be able to be a fly on the wall of what did you just take out of that time? I probably wouldn't go back and listen to the interview of myself. I was in the room. Yeah. But I would go and listen to the interview of those two people that interviewed me and hear what they had to take away. Yep. And so that was the reason why we did that. One, because every episode that we have, I feel like I have kind of this aha moment, or I needed to hear that moment. Yeah. And it was encouraging to me. And so that kind of second podcast is something that we do. But I'd say even in our single or our duo casts, as we call them, there's always something like, I needed to hear that today. Yeah.
There's a lot from that. Like I get a lot out of interviewing people. You get jazzed and you just get excited just like hearing their story. Like, I needed that. Yeah. But like to your answer though, Ben, like I think you see a lot of business owners and people that are trying to be influencers. And even before I came to Uncommon, like I thought, I'll start a podcast. Yeah, right. And as you know, like I am not the voice of this podcast. Like I do not have a podcast voice. Like I'm more like, if you see me in person, I'm more charismatic, like with my body instead of my voice. And so I think it's people trying to like, everybody wants to be an influencer of some sort. Because if you're passionate about something, you want to go serve people. It's like, I want to help people, influence people in a positive way, especially more than ever today with social media, Facebook. But then you find out you just don't have the skills. You know, like you don't have what it takes to do that, which is fine. You're not blessed with everything that you have. Yeah. But like, and so then, but maybe you do, and maybe there's a learning curve.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I would say that I've learned over time is that you don't have to posture beyond who you are or what your capabilities are. There is something that is in there about persistence. Like, so people can trust you. If you're a voice that's trying to help them see something uncommon, they have to hear you speak or read the things that you're doing, right? That influence does have to be there, and you're dependable when you're there, which is why I think like the amount of times like you guys are podcasting, or if you get folks who are listening, if you think about, you know, your blogging or your attempts to when I say influence, I don't mean like try to point to yourself from a grandiose perspective, but like you feel like you have something to offer. Yeah. Okay. But that influence does cost time. It does cost effort. And sometimes it does cost, I don't know whether this is doing anything, space in your mind. But
it's lonely. It's lonely.
It is often lonely. But you don't get that influence if you don't persist. That's true. But, you know, you don't have to be a person who, you know, blogs 4 or 5 times a day. Like if your capacity is twice, but it's thoughtful, like twice a month and it's thoughtful, or you can put on like with the podcast that we're talking about here, could you do, you know, 4 to 6 full episodes, super thoughtful podcasts from Uncommon Wealth in a month? Probably not. Like you need the buffer of, hey, what's the simple thing that we know that we've learned over time and we can give them that doesn't actually even require an extended commitment from someone so that they can get wisdom and you can share it. that doesn't carry the same burden as, if you're going to prepare to talk to somebody and make sure that their wisdom comes out well in a podcast, right? And same thing, the duocasts are even a different level of effort or thought load than interviewing someone else, because it's not that you don't care about each other, but like the honoring that you want to do for someone who's willing to share their time and space with you is different than a comfortable room of which you can be fallible and you won't notice it.
Yeah.
So let me articulate that in a different light. Like, we want to be Yoda when somebody else that we're interviewing, we want them to be Luke Skywalker. But then in the duo cast, now we have to somewhat be Luke Skywalker a little bit. Like, we have something to say and we want to say it. So it does take a different level of bandwidth. And it does take a different level of intention. Which I think a lot of people, or like, I really envy those people who are a single solo podcast. Like, how in the world?
I've done it. It is the weirdest feeling in the world to be
brutal.
Mine's, I usually have 3 or 4 people in a room, but if I've done it twice, where I was just a guy talking, and you think about the talking head political folks and whatever, and they're just sitting there chatting away for an hour. It is the oddest feeling.
How do you do it?
No, I couldn't do it.
No,
because there's that guy, a scientist guy that has like one of the #1 podcasts or something. And he does it. He just sits there and talks about a subject, and I'm like, I would stutter all the time. In my thought process, because then you're legitimately in my mind. And then you also have to know your strengths and weaknesses. Like, my strengths are not probably prepping. Like, my weaknesses are probably like, well, give me the microphone, let's see what we have to say. And surrounding myself with people who have their own opinions to be able to comment off of those opinions. And in that will kind of snowball down the mountain, and we're going to have somewhat of a snowball at the end of this thing. But to me, like, the intentionality of writing out an outline, following the outline, is almost like you're kind of on stage and you're giving a presentation. It's not really what our podcast is. And so I'm super grateful to have Aaron do the duocast with me, because it's just something that we can bounce ideas off of each other now.
And so if there's an encouragement, I think, in some of this for the folks who are listening, like, there's a difference between frequency and consistency. Consistency does buy you influence, which we want. We want your brilliance to shine into the world and shade people and help them out. But that doesn't mean it overburdens you to the extent that, like, you end up hating podcasting or blogging or whatever, because it overtook the things that you're otherwise passionate about. And again, I brought that up because I thought the way that you've structured this podcast has allowed you to do that. It's allowed you to actually increase your frequency with the after interview stuff and with some of the smaller ones without, I can't believe
Simple step.
There we go.
There it is.
Without otherwise, like, quadrupling the burden to be able to produce it. So I think there's an encouragement in there as an example from you guys. So nice work.
I don't know if we would got to our 100th if we were just like, we have to keep doing as long as we can duocast and guests. It's just hard after a while.
And there's a learning curve too, because like, I don't know, when I first came on having guests on, I remember like Phil being like, okay, you're getting it now for like the guests, And so, I mean, because not everybody has like an amazing story, to tell, and not that everyone's story is amazing in their own way, but to impact and like to reach our goal of the podcast.
Yeah, sometimes stories are more engaging than others. And then when I ask people to come on, there's usually a specific thing that I'm trying to pull out. And you were doing a great job of getting people in, but it was like, but what are we pulling out of these people? And Aaron's like, no, they just have a really cool story. And I'm like, well, I don't know this story, so let's go see how it goes. And so, there's a learning curve in inviting people into the show. And so, although I will say it's super nice to have a show to be able to ask somebody like, hey, I have a podcast. Like, I'd love to unpack your story.
That's a fun thing to do.
And I just interviewed the guy who did the bear hunt, Brad Meckley. I just had coffee with him yesterday. And he was like, from that podcast, I'm getting more and more excitement about telling other people about the bear hunt and how excited they're getting. And I'm like, yeah, buddy, that's awesome. Great.
Yeah, exactly right. So interestingly enough, over 200 episodes combined as of this morning. We're going to say it's roughly about 74,000 listens across content, right?
It sounds amazing, but really, when you break that down, I don't think it's going to be that amazing.
Aaron is like 38,000 of them. He like listens to the program over and over again.
I do.
My parents are the other probably 30,000.
Jazz the numbers. But interesting question, just to see if I'm sure you've put a lot of thought into this, but if you had to guess where your show was most popular, either Russia or Egypt, which would
Egypt
it be?
All day long.
Slam dunk?
It's a slam dunk.
Aaron?
Well, I'm just now going to be
Please
like,
don't say Russia because we could be getting hacked. I don't know.
I'm just going to say Russia now because he's told me not to.
Okay, eye into Aaron's personality.
Yeah, that's right.
You said I couldn't say Russia. Russia is correct.
Russia.
Oh, wow.
Oh, Aaron.
No. I mean, this right. You're internationally known to the tune of 16 listens in Russia and 6 in Egypt. So if you're popular in Egypt, it may be my mistake.
We did get an email one time. We were like trending up in Belgium, but that's not the case anymore. Lost them.
No. But what if they dipped their toe in and decided
it ain't for us?
There's fresher water somewhere else. But interesting as we think about podcast listens, and I think this goes even to a little bit of the conversation we were just having. On a weekly basis, the show averages about 60 to 70 listens on the core episodes, and maybe between 50 and 60 when you talk about, well, the simple steps are about the same. After the bonus episodes end up being between 50 and 60. And so 74,000 listens sounds awesome. International sounds awesome. And then you look at weekly and you go, 60 to 70. I don't know how that hits you. I also run a podcast, but you think, well, I don't know.
Yeah, what are we doing here?
Like, because, I was hoping for thousands.
Yeah.
And you're looking at 60 to 70. And so maybe my question to you is how does that number hit you, recognizing that in and of itself, that's probably the wrong question.
That's right.
But let's start with it.
Okay.
Because it is a piece of information that's available to you. Like, how do you think about, hey, we reached 60, 70 people on a new episode, are we happy? Are we hesitant?
Good.
What do you think?
Okay. So I'll answer honestly because that's who I am. I'm like, that's discouraging. But then I think of but I'm doing this for myself and I'm getting something out of it. Mm-hmm. So I'm grateful for those 60 to be a fly in the wall for the things I'm learning, I guess. So I'll try to spin it in the positive light. It's Friday. I'm feeling pretty good.
No, it's shocking. I'm competitive. So, I know we've talked about how much do we have to, I just asked before we started the podcast, how many do you have to have to start maybe making money? And then you just threw out the number. I'm like, we're a long ways from that.
We're a ways.
But just because I wanted to know, but in the same sense, I mean, I got into this business to help people, and we can only manage so many people's books. And so if we get to help 60 more people through our podcast, I'm like, that's awesome. And then honestly, the podcast, like I've mentioned before, I'm not the most amazing voice on the podcast, but I get long-winded so much in things, and this has really helped me shorten it down.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Good.
Just in my off life, not on the podcast even, just it's because Philip's really those shorts, those simple steps.
Yep.
I'll say this too, because I'm just trying to make myself feel better. We have done zero marketing. And so I know a lot of those shows do a lot more marketing that are getting more and more listens. And so the fact that we're still trending at 60 or 70 is actually kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
And I feel like if I could have more time to promote the podcast, I think that we could do better. Now that's probably me and my prideful mind saying that if I just worked on a little bit more, I could get better results.
There was more of me in this.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I will say that I think that's nice because we haven't really marketed this at all. So
I do think it is super healthy to get to ask the question is what am I wanting to get out of it, right? Aaron, I think is a very salient point is if your sphere of influence is, you're able to hold X number of folks that you could actually sustain influencing and you got X, Y back, you can't actually even support that number of people who listen to the show, providing you feedback, asking you questions, want to talk to you. You know what I'm saying? There is you can have positive problems, which you couldn't even bear it. And so there's I don't want to say there's an ego in it, but there is let's say you got 10,000 listeners. What are you
going to do then? Right. And we've never pointed them to anything. Does that make sense? Our podcast is literally we hope that you go on your uncommon journey and take some of this advice and use it.
Yep.
Go do it. Create something. You're going to love it. But we haven't ever pointed any of our content into and now you're a client. So I kind of am happy about that. And I'm not that smart anyway to figure it out. So I'll just keep saying words in a microphone and see what happens.
Yeah. And again, measuring the right types of things. What I heard you say was it allows the ability to pursue some unique relationships or circumstances. Hey, can you come on the podcast and share your story? It allows you, it's something that you benefit from both in personal and work lives. It allows you to not only learn from other people, but be able to share it. Like you've provided a medium. It's not like 10,000 people couldn't listen to it tomorrow. It's not going anywhere. There's a persistence to it.
Something we don't have to recreate.
Exactly.
Which I recreate a lot of things.
Continues to create value. And so, again, encouragement to folks listening, whether it's a podcast or, something like that, measuring the right things is important, right?
Yeah.
Like, numbers isn't necessary. Like it's an indicator. It tells you something.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean it tells you everything.
Right.
Okay. Let's talk about those simple step episodes.
Okay.
So the goal is 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, you're close.
Okay.
You're close.
I usually put a timer on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty close. Here's the thing.
It's the music.
I think you fellas are after about 5 minutes, and then you're chit-chatting. Sometimes I can't figure out, this is a little behind the scenes,
Is this
when the
done?
podcast is over.
Yeah.
Like it'll sound like it was summed up, and then someone else can say something else, and someone else going to re-sum it up or say something else. Feels like we might be reaching for a catchphrase.
That could be feedback. That's feedback right there.
You're about 6.5 minutes by the time this rabble is going on.
Yep, that's Aaron trying to learn how to compact something. Because we get talking, I get excited, and I got something else I want to say.
I love it.
So I do think they're super helpful. Like, and I think the things that you guys are pointing out, like what seeds that are these common things that you're seeing among folks you're working with, things that are in your personal life, all of the above.
Yeah.
I'm just going to be honest. Those are the hardest ones to come up with because you got to come up with a subject you can talk about. What we're trying 5 minutes.
Yep.
So, because I remember one of the first ones we did was financial infidelity.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Scandal.
Yeah, and then
Scandal.
I threw out some verbiage, and Philip's like, "What? No, can't say that. That's like a whole 45-minute podcast." I'm like, "Dang it! That makes sense."
Yeah. Yeah, so a lot of times, I like just in and out, just boom, boom, boom. But it'll be things that either I've witnessed from another client, or something that I'm learning, or something that I feel like God's trying to teach me.
Yep.
So those are the three kind of recipes. I think the fun thing that we've been doing is I don't tell Aaron, especially when I have a good one. I'm like, buddy, just hang on. You're gonna love it. And you usually do.
Yeah, I do, and it's great. I think it makes it really hard for the 5-minute thing because then I get all halfway through. I'm like, oh, I got my thinking process on now.
Yeah.
Then it's we got to re-wrapping it up. But yeah, it's been helped. It helps it make it way more authentic
authentic is a good word.
Authentic. There we go. That's the word.
Yep. So about, I want to say a little over halfway to 200 episodes. So we, starting at episode 100, you got 20 or 30 podcasts in, and then you had a major shift in your business.
Yeah, we did.
Major shift in the personnel and in some ways how the business is running.
Yeah.
In what ways do you feel like that was reflected in the stuff that you were covering from a podcast perspective? And to a certain extent, was there any catharsis in it?
Good. It's a good question. So what you're talking about is the ownership change that Brian Dewhurst is no longer an owner at Uncommon Wealth Partners,
or a guy on the podcast, right? Because one of the impacts is Brian was on most of the the podcast
he's out.
episodes,
right. Yeah. So he's no longer in the company.
Yep.
And he was more of the technical things when we would talk, and so absolutely the podcast changed. The fun thing about this is we leaned into it. We were just like buffaloes going into a storm. We're going straight into this thing. And then now we have to make it about what we wanted it to make it. It kind of was this, like you said, cathartic in, well, what do you want to make it here?
Yeah.
And I knew that we couldn't be fake and try to be technical. That's just not probably where we're at, or it's going to take us too long, or we're not going to articulate it very well. And so, well, what are we now going to talk about at this uncommon journey and this uncommon wealth?
Yeah.
And that's where, I feel like God has helped us kind of map this course of where we're at now, but I do think it changed. And probably some people didn't like the change, right? That's fine too.
Yeah.
I'm not for everybody, and neither is Aaron, right?
No.
And so to knowing that, just we have to be ourselves, or we just have to shut it down, which I don't know if that was what we wanted to do. Obviously not. So I think it's a good question. I think that's probably something that numbers could show us what that looks like. So I don't know. I just kind of keep going. I'm kind of like a termite. Just keep living and
eating the wood.
Eating the wood, man. Eating the wood.
Aaron, did you feel kind of walking into that situation? I don't want to say filling a chair, but it felt like it. How did that hit you? Is that something that made you nervous? Something you were excited about?
I mean, a little nervous because, Brian was really good with his words, like articulating like really smart things. Yeah. And I've said this on the podcast before, like I'm dyslexic and things like, so like me and words, we don't get along. Like
Aaron's done a really good job because in interviews I get hyped up and like I know the next question I want to ask.
Yeah.
And so Aaron's had to really challenge himself of like, well, I have a question now. I need to just jump in there. Because if not, Philip's going to ask another question and Aaron's going to be in the back just kind of having a great front row seat to this great interview.
Yeah.
So you've done a really good job of asking these good questions because there's some times where he'll ask the technical questions to our guests and I'm like, oh, that's a perfect question to ask this. Like it was almost like a question like a more technical person would have asked, right? Yeah. And so that I'm super grateful for. And I'm thankful for his courageousness of like, sometimes you just need to cut me off. And I'm like, oh yeah, that was better than what question I had.
Yeah.
That flows nice. And so there is something about having two people interviewing that you can have two different thought processes that I appreciate.
Yeah. Yep. That makes sense. If you guys think about if there's somebody listening who, entrepreneur or otherwise, who thinks, I'm thinking about starting a podcast. What would be your reaction, advice, warnings? I don't know.
Yeah. Aaron Kramer, everyone.
Oh my gosh. Like, yes. Cause I have noticed when you and Brian first interviewed me, like when I came on, I even listened to it. I was like, that's not so bad. Like, okay. And then when you got to be the interviewee, that changed. Cause now you have to be really good at your questions, like repping off questions. And we are taught as people to be very engaged in a conversation. And I found myself being like listening, and then they answer the question, and then they stop, and you're not thinking about the next question because you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're engaged and really listening. So if you're thinking about starting one, do the hardest thing. Listen to what you sound like on recorded. That's hard. And then also, how good are you at interviewing people?
Yeah. It is a distinct skill. I will tell you this, and this is going to sound odd and slightly ironic given the situation that we're in. So I've been podcasting for over a decade. I'm not a particularly good interviewer. Like some people are really good, like insightful questions. They're good at kind of putting a couple different things together and getting into some core details. I would say, Philip, to a certain extent, we're similar in that like I'm interested in kind of the parlay of it, and like we can keep a conversation going. But the Charles Kuralt or the Tom Brokaw, I am not.
We're not those people.
No, not that at all.
But
I think to recognize though that it is a skill. And it's a practice skill. I have not gotten better, but you can. You can get better. But it is distinct from, hey, I like people. Hey, I'm good with people. Hey, I know things. None of those three things necessarily mean
add up. You should podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That then one more thing is like also. Whatever your podcast idea is, start just asking people if they would be interested in being on the podcast, because you might be shocked about who will be on the podcast and not. I was thrown way off in the beginning, asking some people, if we want to be on the podcast, and it seemed the very outgoing people, and they're like, no, that seems scary. And it was like, oh.
Yeah.
So your pool might be smaller than you think it is.
Yeah. You tell them, say, 60 people listen. It's not that risky.
Yeah. That's right. That's right, baby. I'm going to hang that thing like a banner. Okay. So my advice to anybody who wants to get into podcasting, shoot 20 episodes before you launch and just see if you can get done. My daughter and her friends wanted a podcast. And I was like, I got the equipment. Let's go. They did one podcast, and then it was like, we can't find time to get the next one. Now, who knows what'll happen in the future, and they can always use my stuff. But they haven't gotten their second one. It's been about 3 months. So get 20 under your belt and record them and get ready to launch them. But then I think, my good old buddy Ben Fust giving me that advice of like, once you start, you got to keep feeding that beast. You got to keep going. And there is a consistency that once your 7 listeners or 60, for this example, get used to the listen and the cadence of your show, they start getting used to that and getting that content. So if something happens and there's not that episode, there's automatically this question of like, well, are they stopping or whatever? So that's great advice. The consistency is one, but then also get a queue of podcasts together for yourself and also for your future if you want to keep doing it.
Yeah. I think it's good to test it out. I mean, this is true for all kinds of different things. Like if you think you got something you want to go try, I mean, there's no reason not to go try it. But give it a few cuts to see whether it fits before you go You don't have to go all in yet.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I will say, and I think you guys would vouch for this, some of the perceived technical stuff is hardest when it comes to a podcast. Because, again, none of the things we talked about that might even make you a good podcaster doesn't even touch stuff that feels like it's difficult. It's getting easier to get into, totally. But it's 3
microphones in one room. I didn't think you'd need a college degree to do it. You do. And then like our sounding in this room is not the best, but to even know what to do with that, like I'd have to have Ben, you come over on some Saturday and like my wife doesn't want any part of it. You know, like it'll just look not aesthetically pleasing. So the podcast is what you're going to get. But that stuff was way harder than I ever thought it would be.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's layers of it too. Not to overindulge on the technical piece, but like you got in a podcast by yourself in the room, like that one fella. It's going to be relatively straightforward.
Yeah.
Even 2, not bad. Soon as you hit 3, soon as you want to do the video at the same time and marry the to your lovely sounding voice in your video, like things just got trickier. They're totally doable, but like it becomes harder to step in.
Barrier to entry. There it is.
Yep, totally. Any particular interviews or shows stick out? I know it's hard if I said like the last 100 because we were together on this 100th episode.
Right. Right.
But like even maybe over the last few months where you're like something stuck with you, a conversation, a particular interview longer than you expected.
Yeah, I wish you would have gave us a list of ours, but what do?
You said the bear hunt's in.
The bear hunt is in. I do think the conversation that we had with Scott and James about business owning and then selling the business and then them having a panic attack.
Yeah.
That was fascinating to me. And I'm pretty sure I probably said this in the bonus episode, but the thing I took most out of that was I'm super grateful that I don't have this huge amount of money in my bank account for me to understand, like, am I doing okay? I might not be doing great. Like, I'm doing horrible.
Yeah.
To this, like, well, hopefully I can do the same thing I did yesterday, today. And so that was kind of my key takeaway of that is like, man, I'm super grateful that God has brought me to where we're at now.
Yep.
And the trial that we have to go through and the people we get to go through it with, that I don't really have that option at this point to tap out. Like this is where I'm at and I need to be joyful in that, which also brings me to what I'm kind of learning this year is like, just focus on the input and let God handle the output, but be joyful in that input and then also make that input sustainable.
Yeah.
You don't want to overwork yourself and then you burn yourself out. So that was probably the episode that I was like, I really needed to hear.
Yeah.
Because these 2 people are high capacity. They created something, they sold something. And then that's when they frizzed out. Like, whoa. And they're even like baffled, like how it was. And so to be able to unpack that with them, particularly was encouraging for me.
Yep. Aaron, how about you?
Mine, like, it'd be a few of them. Like it'd been Paige Whitty's and then Nick Darlin's that we just shot not too long ago.
Yep.
Those 2, I think ones like that and those ones like right now being put on the spot to ask, like those ones are the ones that stick out because they're the ones that really show if you just keep pounding the stone, like success happens, like, cause this is the thing, like we interview a lot of business owners and we get to meet a lot of business owners. And I've always really enjoyed talking to business owners because they know what it means to just grind it.
Yep.
Very few of them ever have success right off the bat. And the ones that do they are usually not the ones you want to be friends with, kind of, absolutely. I mean, not all the time, but just like the ones that really know the grind. And then like it's a nice reminder, just like keep pounding the stone wherever you're at. But then like, the other one would have been, is my uncle and my second cousin, like, because it just to see them, I learned a lot there. I'm not in the business. Yeah. And so hearing what they've had to do and like knowing how they had to grow up and like really make things work is always super encouraging.
Yeah. There's an endurance that comes from being a business owner. Yeah. And almost like the same question, like, how long you been married? 48 years. You're like, oh boy, he knows, how long you been a business owner? Like, oh, okay. And there's this instant like, ooh, you've been able to come through some hard things.
Yeah. Well, and I think that aligns with where you were coming from, which is like grinding something out, having grit through extended amounts of time trying to build a business is being faithful in the means because like the ends are delayed. Your expectations are different. Yes. How quickly you're going to see the results. Like it's not just even, if you think of doing work that isn't entrepreneurial work, like I put in effort, people give me money. Yeah. That's an easy expectation. That isn't your life as an entrepreneur. And recognizing that and like being able to have joy in that process, like you better be doing it for joy's sake. The same reason we're podcasting for the value of the relationships and the continuation of being able to build a set of wisdom and knowledge that otherwise people can react to. The number of folks, it's a running gag on the 60, but like that's the candy. Like that's the thing that you also get. If we're measuring the thing right. And so like as an entrepreneurial endeavor, like do you enjoy the work that you're doing? Do you find value? Are you encouraged? Are you energized for the way that what you offer to the world is being accepted and used? And you got to feed your family for sure. But like oftentimes the thing that is the ideal output, it's either going to be delayed or just gone. Like it's not going to happen the way that you expect it to. And so you have to be able to find joy in that process. Which frankly is an opportunity. Like you can do that anywhere. Yeah. But even as an entrepreneur, you actually have a little bit more control on your ability to find joy in your day-to-day processes. Whereas like, you're cranking out widgets somewhere, like you don't control the widgets, you don't control the things they gave you to process the widget. Like you're just kind of, it's less in your hands. And so I think it's a super wise encouragement and something that, everybody in the room benefits from. Yeah.
I've been getting a lot of, so I've been kind of getting around more and more business owners, which is life-giving. But my question to them is like, if you came in with $15 million, what would you do? And my favorite people are the people who would be like, all right, this is how I would impact my business. This is how because they're in the right spot. The people who are like, I would so quickly get out of here. Like I would drop what I'm doing. Yeah. I'm like, oh boy, like, I don't know if you're in it for the right reasons, and maybe the grind of it is just wearing you down to nothing and you're just in a tired state. That could be it. But then we have something to talk about. Yeah. I was going to say there's probably times if I got asked that or you got asked that on a certain day at a certain hour, you'd be like, I'm out, but I like that. Cause with you, I love asking other advisors that, cause my, tell for an advisor if people come first. Every advisor is going to tell you people come first, right? Yeah. But it came with one of my good friends, and we talked about this a while back. And it was interesting. It's like, well, if you won the lottery, what would you do? He's like, oh, I would still work. I would just work for free. Oh yeah. And I'm like, you truly just want to help people and be here, and you love what you do. I was like, this is amazing. He's uncommon. Yeah. So I think that's good. It's interesting.
Well, so I've got a final question for you. Okay. And so, but you're going to I'm going to give you a break so that you got a chance to think about it.
Land the plane.
The question that you're going to have to answer is, let's say we're on the road to 300 episodes that we want under our belt. What do you want to be true about the next 100 episodes from the Uncommon Wealth podcast? Now, while you ponder that and maybe a short restroom break or Diet Coke, I'm going to encourage, so you guys that are listening to the podcast, here's what we're going to do. We're going to offer you something that you can offer back to us. That's exactly what I was after. Great. So we've been talking about, the ability, the folks that listen, and does it even matter? Actually, one of the things that I thought was really cool is I was thinking about your the post episodes, the after the interview. It is such a gift to be able to see your life, your situation articulated through someone else's eyes, right? So not just summary of AI can summarize the podcast totally, but to have not only you be able, it's not like you're submitted to him for examination, but sometimes people have a way of seeing you, your work, your effort, your words, your influence in a way that either you don't see or they just said it. Some people can just say things in such a way wow, I don't know if I would have thought about myself or my situation in that way. And it's so encouraging. It's super encouraging. And so I'm going to encourage you to be that for other folks, being able to speak into someone's situation, into their life. This is where people can get this wrong. I'm not saying go in and just start judging their life and telling them what you think about everything they do. But there is something, it takes so little encouragement to keep people floating.
Yes, and you have no idea.
Yeah, it's just so little. This is all leading up to the thing I'm going to ask you to do. But so I've had a podcast again for over a decade. You guys have heard me before. I was on the show.
Oh, you were? Yes.
It's the episode called Sounds Right. It did very well, but it's because I kept clicking and refreshing.
Yes.
I'm running the clicks up on my own episode because I'm the analytics man and I know how it works. But one of the things after we podcasted for so long, similar situation, we might be better than 75% of podcasts, which this one is from a listenership perspective. But you're like, it feels like you're talking into the ether. Mm-hmm. Does it even matter?
Right.
And so we put up a complaint line because that was funny. Like most people who are going to call are probably going to be upset with the show. This seemed right for us, so we put up a Life from the Path complaint line. And what I've found is that probably once every, sometimes it comes in like a river, but like once every 2 to 3 months, someone's going to mention something on some back show that we've long since forgotten about that made some significant difference in what they're doing. They'll say, we listened to the show and it really helped guide a conversation we had at my house this week.
Wow.
Like, wow. Or something we'd heard recently, which is interesting because like Philip and I were meeting and then I got something where someone had called into our complaint line and it was some sort of appreciation for there aren't a lot of places to have substantive Christian conversation. Like either people are talking out at you or you're trying to go by some sort of like book or set of guidelines, but people to really kind of tease apart the places where how does this faith and what we believe to be true permeate into our lives and the depths of the things that we're trying to do with our eyebrows and elbows to change the world. And it was a great encouragement. And if I got 2 of those a year, I go, this is creating value for the people that are in the room doing the podcast and
that person.
At least 2 people.
That's right.
And totally worth it.
Yeah.
And totally worth it. And so the Uncommon Wealth podcast,
there it is,
has got a feedback line.
There it is.
I'm presuming fewer complaints, more feedback in this podcast than mine. So here, I want you to write it down. I'm going to give you 3 seconds. Go ahead. Okay, very good. I don't know if that was a full 3. That's my head count. Maybe my head count was fast.
It was.
Okay, here's the number. 515-446-8158. 515-446-8158. You can call or you can text that number and provide some feedback on the Uncommon Wealth podcast. Maybe you think it's great and you want to share it with everybody. Maybe you're super disappointed in this episode. You say, this feels really self-indulgent and like we get it. And you want to text us that. Yes. Go ahead. 515-446-8158. It helps everybody get better at the things that we're doing. And if the content or the topics or how they're approaching things has hit you in any way that you feel like it's worth sharing, we just love to hear from you. So call, text. No one's going to pick it up. Okay, so you don't have to worry if it makes you nervous that like Aaron's going to pick up the phone. It's not going to happen.
And it should if you're going to give us bad feedback.
Yeah. That's right. What you want. Actually, I lower Aaron's voice down like 5 steps so he sounds super intimidating on the podcast. So anyway, don't lose it. Put it in your phone right now.
And we'll talk about that because I think one of my goals for next year, if we think about the next 100, let's say, is that we would have at least 4 or 5 people give us feedback on that line.
That'd be great.
That would be great because like you said, we're just talking into a microphone, into the ether, what's going to happen.
And our listeners need to know, like with us being entrepreneurs, like we love feedback. We have thick skin.
Yeah.
Like you can tell us that you sucked. It's like, please just tell me why though. Don't just tell me I suck.
Yeah.
Right.
But you can if you want to.
Yeah.
And I take it. I'm a big boy.
All right. So let's go back to the question.
Okay.
What do we want in the next 100?
What do you want in the next? What would you want to be true of the next 100 episodes? That's the question.
That people listen to this and they really feel like, okay, I have an idea that I want to now take a step towards. Mm-hmm. I want this podcast to encourage at least 1 or 2 people in the next 100. That says, you know what, I can do that. Yep. Or if they hear a podcast like, if they can do it, I can do it. Like that's basically the reason why we started this podcast.
Yeah.
And then throughout that, interviewing people and just hearing their stories has been encouraging to me. And so that's what I hope the next 100 is, but that somebody takes that and now applies it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Bam. Aaron.
I think mine, I want to, if I really look at it when I want the next 100, I want to find more unique individuals like Mike Burdos, we did for Power Center. Like, I'm going to get more people out there that we don't have connections with. Like, I'm just want to hit people up and be like, hey, be on our podcast. I want to hear your story.
Right.
Because I think that, to me, that's super encouraging. It's encouraging to myself, like just to hear people. The guy was just,
bigger names.
living in, I don't know, small town somewhere and, do big things. An everyday Joe can do something big. Like, you just got to take the leap. And I want to hear more of those stories because selfishly, I really like hearing them.
Yeah. Well, it's super encouraging too. Like, the variety of stories of which people go from one situation to another. We tend to get boxed in by, we believe there's a path to go do something, and unless I know how to walk that path, it's not going to go. You can't make the change. But they're like, just all stripes and all kinds of folks are living uncommon lives and getting there in uncommon ways. And I think at the very least, even if you don't resonate with anybody's particular story, it continues to remind you that there are a myriad of stories. There's a million ways to go after the life that you want to go live. And you're seeing other people do it and stuff that, like, you don't have to be bound by what you thought of. There's all kinds of people doing all kinds of cool stuff. And the more you're open to hearing it, the more your mind then can start taking in opportunities that you may not have previously seen.
And also to understand, like, you don't have to be a Jeff Benzo to, like,
Bezos? Jeff Bezos.
There you go, Jeff Bezos.
Somewhere Jeff Benzo was like, I don't know, I do all right.
Yeah. But, like, to, like, do your own path. Like, like, just starting a path is successful. Like, taking the leap.
You're going to learn something.
Yeah,
for sure.
All right, man. You've been listening to the 200th with an asterisk because of those extra bonus episodes. It's probably over, but we're going to call it the 200th episode of the Uncommon Wealth Podcast. Congratulations, fellas. I think everything that you're trying to do is coming through. I'm super excited to hear the next 100 that come out, and super excited to hear some feedback from the folks.
That's going to be exciting.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys so much again. 515-446-8158 on that Uncommon Wealth feedback line. Thanks for hanging out with us on this 200th episode extravaganza, and we hope to see you down the podcast lane.
Awesome.
That's all for this episode, brought to you by Uncommon Wealth Partners. Be sure to visit uncommonwealth.com to learn more about our services. Don't miss an episode as we introduce you to inspiring people who are actively pursuing an uncommon life.